Welcome to Weird Ways. I'm Samantha.
And I'm Christian.
We're working on an odd project here, so thank you for joining us. In this episode, we'll be discussing one of the movies from the 100 Movies Scratch-Off poster. We'll be using our trusty-dusty D10 to help us choose the numerical value of the movies from the poster. In today's episode, number 45.
Forrest Gump.
Some of the movies on our list we have seen, some of them we haven't seen. It'll be a great mix, but I think it was kind of a good one
to start
with one that we have seen, but it's been so long. I remember it used to be, I think it played on TV. I feel like it played on TV all the time, or everyone was watching it for a while.
Yeah, it's become a bit of a cultural icon, and at least for my generation, it helped elevate the actor. Who played him?
Tom Hanks.
I almost said Ben Stiller. Yeah, it elevated Tom Hanks to I guess, A-list status for folks who didn't grow up with him.
I think this movie came out right before Toy Story 2.
True.
Where he played Woody.
Yeah, definitely. Great performance.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of things. It was a tearjerker, a love story, a life lesson. A lot of things kind of melded into itself.
Yeah.
But man, what a journey.
There was a lot of references. If you were as we were a kid when the movie came out, so many things just go right over your head.
Yeah.
And now that we're older, rewatching the movie, we actually recognize all of the historical moments that Forrest Gump mentions throughout the movie.
They're the ones that just kind of show up in passing, like Elvis and...
It's essentially a recount of his whole life.
Yeah.
And we're following Forrest Gump along this journey.
I think it was, amongst many things, a story that at least inspired me now, rewatching it at this point in my life, a better understanding of the things that make people happy, and not in the sense of, I guess, work or purpose. It's the story of a man who just tries to live his best life and do what comes natural to him.
And he loves Jenny, and he loves his mama.
Yeah, he's definitely very well-grounded.
Wait, Jenny! 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 Jenny, 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 Alabama!
I think the movie, even since it came out in 94, a lot of the events that it goes over, by the time the movie came out, were already older events.
Facts.
So it's kind of like the year is 2021 right now. If we're talking about events that happened in 2012, then people might react differently.
Yeah.
Because it takes place when Forrest Gump was supposedly born in around 56, I think. And we basically see him from 1960 through, presumably through today, to the Vietnam War.
Yeah.
And then we go through the 80s, and then, or there's the hippies. Yeah, through the 80s, several assassinations. There was JFK, attempts at Gerald Ford, Watergate, and by the time 1994, these were all old news.
So many assassination attempts.
Yeah, and I don't think there have been as many maybe close calls or successful assassination attempts.
Yeah, at least in my lifetime, I I don't think I've lived through an assassination attempt for the president.
Not that we know of.
Right, for sure.
Check on the deal.
What was one character that stood out to you the most?
I think Lieutenant Dan has always been my favorite.
Yeah.
Well, I remember just being little, or when I was younger watching the movie, I thought, he's such a character. Why did my family let me watch this movie? I don't know. It's a staple movie. It's great.
It's not a bad film, I don't think, for
No.
a kid to watch.
There's just
A couple adult
some
themes.
boobs, F-bombs. There's some swearing. I mean, it is rated PG-13, so
It is a
not
family-friendly
too-
film, I think.
In some aspects. I mean, they show cocaine and heroin use.
I thought that was sugar.
And so I think just because of the drug references and whatnot, I'd say older children family movie.
I will agree with you that in the sense of the character that stood out, for at least for me, being Lieutenant Dan. I really enjoyed his sense of progression. Out of all the characters there, he definitely had the most change. So there was a clear character arc from somebody who later in the film we come to find out had this sense of destiny for him to die in a war as his forefathers.
My daddy did it, my daddy's daddy, and my daddy's daddy's daddy did it.
And when he couldn't fulfill this self-proposed destiny, thanks to the actions of the main character, Forrest Gump, he had to rediscover himself and went through a lot of hardships. And it was very satisfying towards the end of the film when Forrest Gump finally marries Jenny, his longtime crush.
Finally.
That we get to see Lieutenant Dan with his magic legs.
With new legs.
That was my favorite. I think one of my favorite quotes. Both of my favorite quotes are with Lieutenant Dan in New York when they were going across the street and a taxi cab almost hits them and Lieutenant Dan's like, "I'm walking here." I'm like, "No, you're not. You're in a wheelchair."
No legs.
And then later, towards the end of the film, when we are introduced to Lieutenant Dan once again with his fiance at Forrest Gump's wedding, and yeah, he had new legs.
You got new legs.
Titanium grade.
Sent that into space.
You got new legs. New legs.
Yeah, I got new legs. Custom made.
Previously, Lieutenant Dan was, I think, my favorite, but after rewatching it, I think Bubba. I vaguely remembered the storm that the ship went through, and I thought Bubba survived up to that point. I thought all three of them were on the ship, and that Bubba. I made up this whole new storyline that Bubba went over in the storm. But no. The Vietnam War got Bubba a lot sooner.
Maybe we're just misremembering it, and
Yeah.
you're just experiencing a Mandela effect.
I think I did. Maybe someone else told me what they thought happened or what they thought should happen.
Speaking of the Mandela effect, it was pretty curious because it's my understanding that a lot of folks, when remembering the film and its most iconic line, "Mama always said life is like a box of chocolates," that's what people remember. But after rewatching it, we come to find out that the actual quote is something else. It's, "Mama always said life was like a box of chocolates." So,
That is.
yeah, I mean, be that as it may, didn't change much of the film, but goes to show you think you know.
I think, and part of that confusion, I think, comes from, she does say life is like a box of chocolates at several points. But what everyone remembers is Forrest Gump re-quoting her.
Yeah.
And that's where he says it differently, because everyone always adds, "Mama always said," but it's that. So she says it, but that's not how Forrest Gump recounts it.
For sure.
So that's kind of why I think that Mandela effect happens with that one. Definitely good. Makes me think maybe I should take up ping pong.
Yeah.
Play. What is it? The best. A line I really liked of Forrest Gump's was, I think he said, the best way the army. I may not be quoting this directly correct. The army figured the best way I'd fight communism would be playing ping pong
Yeah.
against China. And I was the first we were the first Americans in China since like a million years.
Yeah, his perception of time was off skew, but I'm not one to talk because I'm pretty bad in that as well. I did enjoy his positive attitude. Okay, there's one thing to be said. This is obviously a film, and bad shit happens in real life. And for this character of Forrest Gump, he was always able to look at the bright side of things to the point where it seemed like he was always on the good end of a flip coin. Like, it came across like he was very lucky in a sense, but
he was pretty dang lucky.
For sure. And also something I didn't really know about this film was that you mentioned it was inspired by a book.
Yeah, so apparently we just found out because I didn't really look up any information before. I never paid attention to the credits in the past, but right in the beginning it says based on a book, which I will need to look up.
By
Who wrote? I don't even know if this is called Forrest Gump. Maybe it's called something else.
Forrest Gump by Winston Groom. So if you're curious, if you're a fan of the film and want to read the source material, something I definitely tend to advocate just because there's always more.
Yeah.
There's a lot more juicier details. Keep in mind that films tend to be less than 2 hours long usually.
When was that published?
And with source material, there's a lot more that can cover and fill in the world you're being presented.
1986.
Okay.
Huh, very cool.
So it got the big screen treatment a couple years after it was released.
That's like 8 years later. I kind of... Ooh, so when the book came out... when the book came out, some of those events, at least from what we saw in the movie, were more fresh.
Ooh, yeah, good point.
So maybe they had to wait for some time to pass. Just like that one South Park episode where they talk about... It's so bad when AIDS is funny. The whole episode is, I think, about people being offended by something. And so in this episode, someone makes a joke about AIDS, and some of the townspeople start to laugh, and they're like, oh my god, is this the moment? Is this when AIDS is finally funny? Like, they spend so long not talking about it or making any jokes about it because it was insensitive. And they have this whole thing, and they unveil a statue that had been made and ready for when AIDS is now funny.
Gee Louise, South Park.
Ugh. So maybe that has something to do with... well, I'm sure it took a couple years for it to be picked up anyways, and the screenwriting, and you gotta find the actors, da-da-da-da-da.
But speaking of AIDS, though it was not plainly stated in the film itself, we are led to believe that the sickness that Jenny succumbed to later in her life might have been the product of her lifestyle up until when she ended up finally accepting Forrest Gump's marriage proposal and actually asked him to marry her, which was a very beautifully recreated scene. I don't know if it went that way in the book, but she partied a bunch. We saw her injecting and snorting and stuff.
She was involved with the hippie free love group as well, and so yeah, either from, it's kind of implied she bounced from abusive relationship to abusive relationship, always turning down Forrest, even though he kept saying, I'll take care of you, you're my girl, you're always my girl. And she's like, no, you don't want a hussy like me, which I think stems from her childhood. And because right in the beginning we're introduced Forrest being a simple-minded fellow, doesn't really understand Jenny and her siblings were being abused. So it's not directly said, but heavily implied in the movie. And I think that could have influenced her throughout her whole life.
Yeah, I think so too.
That I'm worthless. I'm just damaged goods. I'm just a little hussy. Or I'm sure he said a lot of mean things.
Her father?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Which probably kept with her throughout her whole life.
goes to show you the influence and that your upbringing can have. Parents. A lot of themes that I noticed. One I pointed out at the beginning of this recording was his sense of optimism. He, by a lot of standards, most folks would say he was dealt a bad card from the get-go, but in his mind, because the movie is told almost entirely from his perspective and we get to hear his thoughts, he never seems bitter, he never seems angry. I don't think we ever see him. The only anger we see is when he responds to somebody attacking somebody else, or
always attacking Jenny.
Yeah, that's when he would
put him up.
But no words. Again, he didn't come across as an angry or vindictive person, but because of his output on life itself, anything that happened to him, any opportunity, and just the way that the cookie crumbles, he would always kind of
come out on top. It was impressive.
It was very motivating, to be frank.
He still had people that would be mean and jerks to him, even as a kid. There were always these bullies throwing things at him.
Yeah.
Jenny always telling the famous lines, "Run, Forrest, run!
You better run!
Run, Forrest, run!"
He was pretty fast too. I love the way that the camera angles played in certain scenes where they would be chasing Forrest down a linear path, and then he'd turn, and then the camera would still be positioned watching the pursuers, and then they would turn to follow him, and by the time the camera tilted, Forrest was already like miles away.
So it was like a dust cloud behind him.
Very creative use of the technology at the time, and it still helped present the fact that he was pretty good on his legs. He was pretty fast.
I wonder if when they were filming that, did they have Tom Hanks like hit the dirt and there was a double
maybe
further away? Like how did they
movie magic. Tom Hanks, if you see this, let us know how it happened.
We want to know. Ugh. But he does come out on top a whole lot. And even when seemingly bad things happen to him, it works out for the better. He gets shot in the butt in Nam, and then in recovery learns how to play ping pong and ends up going to world championships, playing for the US team. And even at one point he listens to his mom, it's like, there's this guy that's offering $25,000 for you to hold the paddle up and say you liked using it. And he's like, okay. And then it worked, and he was able to, with that money, able to get the shrimping business up and running, which inspired a real life shrimping business.
Right, Bubba Gump
is a thing.
Is a real life thing.
I've not been.
So I really did enjoy also how the movie tried to mix history with a little bit of coincidental fiction, or whatever the proper term is. But we come to find out based on the film that, for example, the bumper sticker, "Shit Happens," was inspired by quotes of Forrest Gump running and stepping on poop. The happy face logo being also an off-chance creation because he wiped his face with a yellow shirt. And then the guy who was asking for help saying, "Oh, I'm down in the dumps. This t-shirt business is kind of putting me under." And then Forrest just wipes his face full of mud.
And it comes out the perfect
That was the most
face.
ridiculous thing. I've never done that. That's never happened to me.
I try. Sometimes I'm like, am I gonna get something big this time?
Yeah. Also, apparently he was somebody who invested pretty early, based on the success of Bubba Gump. Lieutenant Dan
took his money and invested it for him
in a fruit business. And then we look at, because he gets it in the mail, he's narrating, "Oh yeah, we don't have to worry about money. Lieutenant Dan sent me this thing, an investment on what he thought was a fruit company," and then lo and behold, it's the Apple logo. So that was the
iPhone company, Max.
Right.
Oh wow.
It was pretty fun.
Like,
Very
what
creative.
are the odds? That's another, just good luck.
Very good luck.
He, after his mama got sick, he went back home. Lieutenant Dan
Took over the business?
Took care of the business.
Right.
So basically,
it's not specified.
owns the business. They were co-owners. 3 ways, because they split a third of it
With Bubba's family.
Which
I thought was very touching.
I mean, he gave him the idea, so it's just as well.
Kept his word.
kept his word. But yeah, and after Gump left, then as Lieutenant Dan took care of everything, Lieutenant Dan took care of his finances, or it's like, I invested a chunk for you. And even Forrest says, we got a letter that says we don't have to worry about money no more.
Yeah. The soundtrack was also pretty star-studded. It had any song that you can think of that just resonates with the Vietnam War. It was there.
I think there's Simon and Garfunkel, a lot of other hits that I don't remember the artists for off the top of my head.
I wish I knew the names as well, but
Probably
I wouldn't be able to name one.
Bob Dylan, maybe.
Oh my gosh. I'm not going to go into that since I have no
I'm not
room to
even
speak.
going to guess anymore.
But it was a lot of films that I guess are very kind of commonplace with war films of that time frame.
The 70s.
Pretty cool to kind of have that blast from the past.
Late 60s, early 70s. Yeah.
You're probably right.
That was good.
Yeah, sad. There were obviously as much luck as he had. There were a lot of things that obviously happened, and I can remember the few little lessons that were left behind by Mrs. Gump, Forrest's mother, because as he quoted, or as he said, Mama always had a way to explain things so that I could understand. So I thought that was pretty cool, like just conceptualize something to make it more palatable for somebody who had a lower IQ. But then it goes to show you, intelligence isn't measured only by IQ. But what I was mentioning is Mom's quotes, death is a part of life. I think that's something that's worth remembering. I think nowadays I think it's continued happening. People are afraid of death and always try to shy away from it, or not talk about it, or not even address it, or prepare for it. But it was a nice kind of lesson to be had, because his mom was just at peace when we come to find out that she's deathly ill and she's on her deathbed.
And she explains with cancer.
Yeah, she just lets him know it's part of life and it's okay. And he didn't shy away from it, because later on when his wife died, Jenny died.
Spoiler alert. I think we spoiled it earlier.
Yeah. To kind of tie it into something I just briefly mentioned about him, Mom's quotes. I lost my train of thought.
IQ. It doesn't
Oh, yeah.
matter. Okay.
That's it. One thing I thought was pretty cool was that as somebody who was labeled stupid by his community and contemporary peers, he managed to get a lot done with somebody that was just kind of labeled low IQ, has learning problems, but yet he was able to exceed in the war, exceed at competition, table tennis, ping pong, exceed at shrimping.
And he brought a lot of people together too at times.
Yeah, he was an inspirational character.
Like with his running.
Yeah, that was pretty cool.
People just rallied around it. They're like, it just makes sense.
3 years he spent traversing the continental United States.
I think he made it at least 3 to 6 times, they said.
Something like that.
Something crazy.
It was pretty cool to watch. I don't know. And that's something else. The logistics of this whole thing. He goes up and picks up his life just to run the U.S. for 3 years. Who's taking care of the mortgage? How is he gaining it? Well,
Apple. Maybe the house is paid off.
True.
Maybe he's already got
But who's taking care of it?
Lieutenant Dan?
He was in the bayou.
Yeah, I don't know. Or, his mama had a maid.
True.
And she disappeared for a little bit, but she came back because he was talking about the house being lonely.
Was it a maid?
Indentured servant?
No, maybe like a friend or somebody who, because the house that they lived in, she was renting out. And at the beginning, he made a point saying
the house had been in his mama's families for generations. And she would sometimes rent rooms out.
Right, so maybe that she was one of those people that
could have been a
up.
permanent resident. Because she
Maybe.
was there since Forrest was little. She showed up and she was recurring in scenes. She was there in the beginning when he was little and younger. She was there because when he'd come in the house and there would be all these people coming by, she popped by. Although maybe she did just live there sometimes.
We don't know.
Because then later she shows up when Mom is sick. She's still there. She's there at Forrest's, or when she disappears for a little bit, and then because Forrest talks about the house being lonely.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, good point.
But then she reappears after Jenny leaves.
Maybe like a family friend.
Or after he comes back from running. She's like, you got something from Jenny. Or because she comes in with his mail. So it's like, did she come back now? Where'd she go?
Questions. I have questions.
Maybe she lived next door or something, just helped out.
I think that's plausible.
And maybe her and his mama were just really good friends.
Maybe
something.
Really good friends.
I mean, didn't her husband was on a
vacation. Mama, what's vacation? That's when you leave and never come back. That was pretty funny. There's a part at the beginning of the film where we show his mom. And kudos to moms like this who, regardless of the condition or state of their children, they just push forward with what they believe is best for their kids, regardless of any kind of thing that might come in their way. And she knew that he was slower, as she said it, on
he
the
had
uptake.
an IQ of 75, they said, and this administrator for the school that he was supposed to go to, that she wanted him to go to. It was supposed to be public school, so
she didn't want him to go.
It was just a local school, but on their standardized testing, I guess he got an IQ of 75. The public school system needed a minimum of 80. Otherwise, he has to go to a special education school. And that's when the mom was like, is there something we can do? And you knew, as soon as you can't hear those words, it's almost like in movies when people say, it can't get any worse than this. And then shit blows up. Is there something I can do to help? It's 5 little points. Yeah. And then the principal's like, is there a Mr. Gump, Mrs. Gump? And that's when I hear Mr. Gump is on vacation. Yeah, it was like one of those, now I can see how perhaps that might not be necessarily suited for younger audiences. PG-13. But we got it. I don't remember, there's so many scenes about this film, I don't remember. No. She's fine. Cats. But yeah, there's a bunch of scenes I didn't recall, and I'm glad we're doing this. I can imagine. I'll put it this way: I'm excited to rewatch films I've seen before in my life, because it gives me the opportunity to revisit some things that I thought had happened, or reestablish the order of events for whatever films. So this was great. Like Bubba's placement in the film, I messed that up. Yeah. Or just, seeing what you've missed. Because we already know there are a ton of, going back to even watching kids' movies, rewatching them and realize all the adult jokes that are just subtly... Mo. Alright. All the adult jokes that are just subtly hidden in there, slipped in. Sure. It's in all of the cartoons, and I think that's why I have issues sometimes watching newer kid shows these days. I'm like, how can they put this on TV with all these bad jokes? But even the shows I used to watch were just as bad, like Cow and Chicken. Yeah, that was such a weird show. Sprinkled with things. Wicked. Any other comments or things you have about Forrest Gump? Let's see what I wrote here. Free talk. Free! Yeah, I think I hit up all the points I wanted to discuss. I think so too. Yeah. So that was Forrest Gump, and it was a fun ride. I will admit, I'm glad that we're choosing movies at random, because it kind of takes a bit of the pressure of maybe you pick one and then I pick one, or maybe I pick two, then you pick two. It's nice leaving it up to the roll of the dice. But again, I was a little hesitant because it's more of a serious film. Again, I'd seen it already, so there was not necessarily going to be a surprise factor. I thought it was serious too, but it turned out to be pretty hilarious. Yeah, there was a lot more lively. There was comedy that was placed in appropriately. Great film. I commend it once again.
Definitely. I also second that recommendation.
So it's cool to watch, but with that said, that's it for our review of the film. If you guys enjoyed
You
what
can
we
find
did,
it on Amazon Prime. If you enjoyed the movie, you can find it available to rent on Amazon Prime, as well as YouTube and several other places have movie rentals available.
and if you enjoyed what we did here and you're willing to join us for the next film, we'll be trying to hit those 100 movies from the 100 bucket list scratch-off poster. So there's plenty more to keep going.
Yes.
And here at this place, here at Weird Ways, we enjoy our films. So perhaps we'll review one that we haven't seen, or maybe that one you haven't seen, or perhaps your favorite film. So join us next time.
Take care, weirdos.